In the early 1500s, Leonardo da Vinci, seated as the 12th Grand Master of the Priori, encrypted the legend of Nimrod, supposedly lived out by Jesus and Mary Magdalene, when he painted his picture of the Last Supper. No doubt his depiction of Mary Magdalene, seated at the right hand of Christ, was his clever and secret way of advancing the Nimrod Holy Grail legend.
The Rosicrucians evolved into later, in about the 1700s, the Masons. Many of them came, many of the Templars fled to Scotland.
The Masonic Lodge continued the myth, symbolized by Da Vinci in the painting, by setting up in its Blue Lodge the reenactment ritual of Nimrod and his wife Semiramis, through which every aspiring Mason must pass.
You know, today in the Masonic Lodge, you can't come to any level of Masonry, Masonic mysticism, unless you pass through the Blue Lodge. The Blue Lodge is a reenactment. It's a reenactment of the death and resurrection of Nimrod. They put you in a sarcophagus, a woman comes, you spring out. It's a reenactment of the very ritual, the very issue of the legend today, to this very day. And throughout the ancient world, this is what men had to go through to be taught architecture. The Masons are initiated today through special initiation rites where you arrive at new levels of consciousness until you arrive at the ultimate, which is to be God. It is a religion. It is not based upon Scripture, but a perversion and interpretation of Scripture, very much like the way the Jews reinterpreted Moses. It's a very, very complex and confusing religious order. And in this country, one of the proponents of Masonry was a man by the name of Albert Pike. He spoke about 14 languages, and he advanced Masonry in this country. But before it came to the United States, anybody and everybody in England was part of the Masonic order. I mean, you weren't in nobility unless you were part of the Masons. Now, when the Pilgrims that left England came here, many people think that the United States is a Christian country. Well, it's true that there's been a tremendous Christian influence from day one. There's no doubt about that. But only 30% of the people on the Mayflower were brethren. Most of them were called strangers. Miles Standish, who was the gang leader of all the people that came over, was a stranger, and the strangers were Masons. Benjamin Franklin, one of the chief statesmen in the early parts of the formation of this country, was a Scottish Rite Freemason. George Washington was a Mason. Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Constitution, was not a Christian. He was a deist, which connects in many ways into there's many ways to God, and God is in all, everything, and in everything. He was not a Christian. 25, listen to me, 25 of the 39 signers on the Constitution were Masons. America is not Christian, it's Masonic. It's a perversion of Christianity. Yeah, we could say, well, you know, the amendments are based upon the division of power because we didn't want a monarchical system. But that was mostly economics, not based upon, it wasn't a religious reason. It was basically more about economics, the beginning. Most of the presidents of the United States were Masons, all but a few. In this country, if you wondered why our laws have been liberalized by the Supreme Court, it's because never in a minority are the Masons. Sometimes 8-1, sometimes 5-4, but always a majority in the Supreme Court dominated by Masons. When you look at the way Washington, D.C. is, I just showed you a picture of the Egyptian obelisk. That's not a small thing. We are under the cloud of Nimrod here to this day. It affects our politics. Mystery Babylon at work in our midst. And it affects every church. I don't care if it's a Catholic church, an Anglican church, a Pentecostal church, a Baptist church. We all are infected by how it infects our culture, and we adopt many times culture to be our Christian faith. Are you a citizen of Babylon or a citizen of the heavenly city?
What was set in motion by the lies of the Roman soldiers and the deceitful Sanhedrin, advanced by the Priori de Sion and its 12th Grand Master, Leonardo da Vinci, and continued through the Masonic Lodge, now has come to the surface again in the Da Vinci Code. This irrepressible force, this mother of harlots of highest deceit, not only blasphemes the deity of Jesus Christ, but also annihilates the meaning of his mission to those without understanding. What a tragedy it is for the great writers, the producers, publishers, and very fine actors to have put their hand to contradicting and trivializing the mission and the person of Christ. Most likely they have done this grave misdeed and miscalculation out of ignorance. Why? Because they, like us, dwell in the shadow of Babylon.